Working, working, hooray, okay. Are you ready? Bava Kamma. We are back to the beginning of the Bava Kamma. And we made our way all the way through Bava Metzia, and you guys love this law so much that we're right back at the beginning, and now it gets physical, if you will. So the whole first chunk of Bava Kamma is all about damages, things that hurt other things, and who's responsible for what and when and how much. And I don't know whether or not you've thought about it, but this is a fairly important section of law, because when something gets broken, I want to know who to blame. I want to know who's at fault. I want to know who's paying for it and how much they're paying for it. And I also want to know, if I'm the one who caused some damage, am I really responsible for paying for this? Do I really have to pay that much to fix it? And if you think of, the issues with car accidents that people have, of personal injury, someone slips and falls outside your shop, but they slip on a banana peel that was left by someone who was leaving the cafe next door, right? Who's responsible for the injury, if anybody? Those are issues that come up all the time in civil society. And especially if you're living in, as we've talked before, about a non-anonymous community, where you will see these people every day for the rest of your life. You know them. You need to have a set of rules that will help make things work. And the Torah gives us a beautiful framework for damages. In fact, we read the bulk of it last week in the Torah portion of Mishpatim. And the Mishnah is going to take that framework and show us what the Torah meant in all of its detail. Good? Good. All right, so Harry, since you're here and you only got another month with us, yes, if you'd like to fire away with the chapter 1, Mishnah 1 of Bava Kamma.
1. There are 4 primary causes of injury: the ox, and the pit, and the crop-destroying beast, and fire.
All right. Now, does that mean these are the only 4 things in the world that can cause damage? No. Right, but when they say primary cause, the term that's actually used in the Hebrew is an av. It is a generative principle, meaning that every type of damage can be subsumed under one of these types, these categories of damage. So think of the word ox, pit, crop-destroying beast, or grazer is my abbreviation, or fire, as being technical category headings, not that these are the only 4 things that can cause damage. All right, so these are categories, these are archetypes of damage. All right, so let's first analyze the relationship between them, and that's what we're going to have up here in just a second in my Technicolor version.
The distinctive feature of the ox is not like that of the crop-destroying beast, nor is the distinctive feature of either of these, which are alive, like that of fire, which is not alive, nor is the distinctive feature of any of these whose way it is to go forth and do injury, like that of the pit, whose way it is not to go forth and do injury.
All right, perfectly clear, right? Yes. So,
yes.
First, what this is trying to say is all 4 categories are necessary. Yeah. That you can't just say, we could cover all types of damages with 3 categories. We don't really need category number 4. All 4 of them are needed. Why? Because the ox is unique in its definition of what it is and how we hold it responsible and the way we handle the damages. The grazer is also important, and the ox and the grazer share a certain similarity, which is they're alive, right? So there is overlap and distinctiveness. They are overlapped together in that they are both alive. Fire is also unique in its own way, but the fire, the grazer, and the ox are also similar in one facet, in that they go forth, right? They cause damage by their movement. They don't cause damage sitting still. But the pit does. The pit is unique in the sense that it causes damage by sitting in one place. And therefore, each one of these has its own little twist that we will uncover as we go through in the coming weeks. But that is sort of the basic framework. So there's a certain similarity between the ox and the grazer, both alive, certain similarity between ox, grazer, and fire. They all go out, and each one is also unique in some aspect. So what is similar, what is unique, and how does that all get applied? That's what we're going to be banging our head on the table for over the next few sessions. Make sense?
Not yet, but I'm sure it will.
4 categories, some similarities, some differences. That's the main thing to hold in mind. And some things are, and which things are more similar than which. Okay, part 3.
What they have in common is that it is their way to do injury and that you are responsible for caring over them. And if one of them did injury, whoever is responsible for the injury must make restitution to the damaged party with the best of his land.
All right, so the part that is all of them, that they all have in common, is damage and responsibility. All right, so what the final part of this Mishnah is saying is they are each different, but they are all subsumed under the big category of damaging things, right, Nizikin, and the one who is responsible for them is responsible for the damage, and we'll tell you exactly how that works, but when you cover your damages, you've got to make good on the damage. That's what that phrase, from the best of your land, is being used for. That you don't make restitution using something that is valueless or substandard, if you will. That's going to come back and be a little bit more nuanced in a bit, but we'll leave it at that for this Mishnah. Good? Okay. Chapter 1, Mishnah 2.
Point 1. Anything that I am responsible to guard, I have rendered it possible to do injury for which I will become obligated.
Okay. So we are going to introduce a concept here that's going to be very important, which is something that I'm responsible to be guarding, something that I am, prima facie, right? I am automatically considered to be responsible for keeping this thing from doing damage to others. Once I am the responsible person for that, the damage that it does is an obligation. That's what it means by possible to do injury, right? If I am responsible to guard it, if it does injury, I, by definition, failed to guard it. And if I'm not responsible for it and it does injury, then by definition, I'm not responsible for the injury that it did. That makes sense a little bit? We're going to need some examples, I know.
So this would be whether I owned that animal, so I'm responsible for it, or whether I hired somebody to watch the animal, or whether I asked somebody to watch it, but didn't hire, wasn't paying. That's what you mean, someone who is responsible for watching it.
Right. Or if I have a little goat and I keep it locked in my room and that's where it lives, then I'm fine. If I have a little goat, and if we could make sure we have, I think, a spare one somewhere, spare handout. If I have a little goat and I stick it out on my front porch and then I go inside to watch TV and it goes and eats the neighbor's petunias, then I'm responsible because I was responsible for watching the goat and I failed to do it. And we know that I failed to do it because it ate the neighbor's petunias, right? If I had been doing my job, if I had been being responsible, then the damage wouldn't have occurred. But the damage occurred, therefore I'm responsible for what I should have been responsible for. Does that make sense?
Actually, even if you kept it in your room, but somehow it got out.
We're going to come back to.
Oh, okay.
That we're going to come back to, right? So this is not necessarily saying that everything that, so the definite, let me think of the right way to phrase this. Because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it's important to get the idea out here. Everything that you handle responsibly is fine. But if you don't handle it responsibly and it causes trouble, then you are liable for it. Now, what it means to handle different things responsibly, that's going to be a big part of our work. of what does it mean to handle an animal responsibly, and do different animals have different levels of responsibility for how I handle them? What does it mean to handle fire, a pit? You know, the thing that's walking down the street eating stuff. What counts as responsible behavior as the owner in these different cases? That's what we're going to be getting into. But this is just setting out the basic principle that if you are responsible, then you're responsible when it causes trouble. Good? Good. Part 2.
If I have partially rendered it possible to do injury, I must make restitution for that injury as if I totally rendered it possible to do injury.
All right. So even if you're only partly responsible for putting it in a position where the damage can be done, you are responsible for the damage that it has done. So the example that they use, and which we'll get more examples later on, is the idea of if you have a pit and the pit is, you come across it is only 4 foot deep, which is not legally deep enough to consider a lethal pit, and you dig it deeper, you are responsible for the damages of things falling in that pit. You can't say, hey, I only dug it an extra 2 feet. Someone else is responsible for the first 4 feet. No, you're the one who turned it into a problem. Even if your part of turning it into a problem was only part of it becoming a problem, if yours was the part, you are responsible. You can't say the guy who dug the first 4 feet should be 2/3 responsible and I should only be 1/3. 1/2. So we just did a quick cover of our 4 basic categories of damage, which we haven't gone into detail yet, but we just tried to show. We have ox. That's, you know, the animal itself. Usually this is the straight up violence of bull on bull attack. The grazer, animals doing what animals do and causing damage in the process. A pit, pretty obvious. And fire, also pretty obvious. What? A pit, a hole in the ground.
Ah, okay.
You know, the mainstay of how many comedy routines, right? Because we always laugh when the damage happens to someone else. Okay, part 3.
When one damages property that fits all of the following categories. Property that does not have sacrilege, that is, for example, sacrificial animals or property that belongs to the temple in Jerusalem. Property that belongs to other members of the covenant, that's other Jews. Property that is owned and the injury is done in any place other than the private domain of the injurer and the common domain of the injured and injurer. In these cases, the injurer must make restitution for the injury with the best of his land.
Right, so this is the category that is the clearest case, which is if it's not already dedicated to temple, because if it's dedicated to temple, it's not owned by the guy who's currently in possession of it. It's owned by the temple, right? And it belongs to another member of the covenant. And at some point, we'll come back and talk about the Jewish concept of damage to property that doesn't belong to another Jew. And that has to do with the idea of being bound by the same set of rules. Much like if you were to say, dude, in American law, we tend to think of laws covering the umbrella of the borders. In Jewish law, we think of the law covering mostly those people that are within the covenant, that are bound by the same set of rules. There are lots of rules, however, that also get added to cover everybody else locally. It's more complicated. We'll get to it another time. The property has to be owned by someone. So if you damage a wild donkey, you don't have to pay anyone the damages. And the injury has to be done someplace other than in your property, right? On your property, there should presumably be a reason of why whatever got hurt was there. And it can't also have been done in the common property, like the shared courtyard. There are rules that will make extensions and mitigations and exceptions to all of those, but that's the general set of principles of.
Can you repeat again, please?
Okay, so that's we're in part 3, right?
No, what you said down a few minutes ago.
Which part?
Yeah.
The last.
The last part.
Yeah, the last
Just
part.
the last part. So where the damage takes place makes a difference. So if it's in my backyard and your cow falls in my pit, right? It's my backyard, right? I'm not responsible for your cow falling in my pit in my backyard. What was your cow doing in my backyard? So therefore, I wouldn't have to pay damages.
We know.
Would not. Again, there are extenuating, mitigating, and all of these other exceptions, but that's the general rule. Right? If I was bringing your cow into my backyard deliberately and it fell in the pit, then yeah, I'm back on the hook. But generally speaking, it's on my property that the damage occurs, and it's not because of my negligence or fault and all of that, then you're sort of out of luck, right? If your cow gets out, runs into my backyard, falls down in the pit and dies, sorry, but not my fault. And similarly for a shared owned space, where I have the right to be doing what I'm doing, if I cause damage, again, doing what I have the right to do, then I'm not responsible for that accidental damage. Obviously, I'm always responsible for deliberate damage. This is only talking about accidents. I don't know if I needed to say that, but I said it anyway. This is only for accidental. If you're deliberately doing stuff, you are always going to be responsible for it. All right. Mishnah 3.
An assessment of injury in money or things worth money must be made before a court of law and by witnesses that are free and children of the covenant, that is, Jews.
Right. So we've had a damage, and it fit the previous criteria, so it's a real damage that's going to need to be settled. That settlement is going to be done by a Beit Din. It's going to be done by the court. It's not going to be just, what do your brothers think I owe you? It's going to be done. What? Is someone there?
I want to see the word grass.
Oh, the word. Sorry, grazer. Yes, the animal that eats, like a sheep or a goat or things like that. That has to be done in a formal setting. You don't just say, well, my brother said that cow was worth $50,000, and now that it's dead, you owe me $50,000. No, the Beit Din makes the decision. The witnesses are important to make sure that they can testify of, well, the damage happened under these circumstances, so therefore we know whether somebody is actually responsible and how much they're responsible to pay. So this is no home justice here. The damages are real issues that have to be handled by a real court. Part 2, very important.
Women may be parties in suits concerning injury.
And that means both ways. So a woman who owns a cow and the cow causes damage, she can be what we would call in the modern world sued, right? She is held accountable for the damage the cow did if it falls under all the rules that we're going to cover. And vice versa, if a woman's property is damaged by someone else's cow, she can sue him for the damages that his cow causes to her property. And you might think, why in the world do we need to say this? Well, in this particular section of the Torah, in Parashat Mishpatim, it uses the term ish regularly, which means man. And you might think that the Torah was specifically saying men's property damaging men's property only. And the Mishnah is trying to clarify, saying, no. Person's property damaging person's property, all of it falls under the same category.
But the woman wasn't at that time like connected to the man, to the husband. So if something that happened like this is honored by a woman, okay, and damage and someone else, okay, property, the person will not go against the husband?
Usually, yes, right? So usually most women were covered, fell under the economic sphere and the property sphere. That doesn't mean they were owned, but the property of the family was owned by the head of the household, which would have been a man. But there were exceptions for that. You could create both contracts and laws and even ketubot, the marriage documents, that would give women property free and clear of anyone else's ownership. Plus, some women simply had no male relatives. They were a widow, for example, and they didn't have a father's home to return to or a brother's home or something, so they were on their own. And they would then have their own property. So it wasn't the most common form, but it absolutely was around. It existed, and they needed to make sure they knew that the law covered that. Otherwise, you just have, the woman's sheep marching through town causing damage willy-nilly and, can't do anything. Or vice versa. You'd have people causing damage to her property and saying, well, too bad, you're a woman. No, the law applies to both directions. And
Point three,
mhm.
the injured and the injurer in certain cases may share in the compensation.
All right, so this is beginning to lay out the principle. Not everyone always gets what they want. That in some cases, the damage is going to be half the cost of the damage. Well, when that happens, the person who owned the damaged item is basically eating half the penalty. Right? If you say that the damage was $1,000 worth, but under the circumstances, the person who should have been responsible and caused the damage is only paying $500. That's kind of like saying the other person is paying $500 for the event. Now, they don't actually pay the $500, they just don't get it back, but that means they've lost $500 in the process. And we're going to go over all of the circumstances where it's full pay and half pay. But they just wanted in the Mishnah, they wanted to let us know right off the bat, there are circumstances where your stuff gets broken and you're not getting the full value.
It's not black and white.
It's very complicated.
And it's also very correlated because it's very similar to what we saw in Bava.
Mhm.
That was the same idea. Like sometimes it's not like you receive all the 100 loss everything. Sometimes it's something in the middle.
Exactly right. I mean, the most famous example was the beginning of Bava Metzia, when two people are fighting over a piece of cloth.
Yeah.
Cut the cloth in half. And that's all you can do.
But it also seems as though if you couldn't foresee that this could happen,
Right. The foreseeing is going to become a big issue.
I can see what, when my little girl she was a little girl, and my neighbor's dog bit my child.
Mhm.
It had never bitten anybody before. It had never bitten anybody after. It was the calmest dog, and yet it did that. So what this is saying is that the medical bills that I had for that would have been shared equally between me and the person who owned the dog.
We're not
rather
there
than
yet.
me holding her responsible.
We're not there yet. And actually,
Okay.
dogs are an interesting case. You're going to see there are some animals that are considered to be dangerous
In
from
themselves.
day one, and other animals that are considered to be what's called tam, innocent, until they have shown a propensity for violence.
Right,
And dogs are kind of on the border.
on the border. I can see why, yes. And I can see why you need to have rules for those animals that are on the border, because what are you gonna do? Duke it out after a fight of them?
That's usually not the right way to
Not
solve a
correct,
problem.
not the best way.
All right, so speaking of different things that can cause damage, yeah, Mishnah 4 of chapter 1.
Wow. All right. The first thing is 5 agents of damage rank as harmless and 5 as an attested danger.
All right, so we're dealing here with two different concepts. One of them is tam, which I just mentioned. Tam means innocent or presumed to be harmless. Therefore, the owner doesn't need to have demonstrated more caution, right? So this would be the equivalent of he was walking past my aquarium and the goldfish jumped out and bit him in the eye. I am not as responsible for the goldfish biting him in the eye as if I were to say he walked past where I kept my pet tiger and the tiger bit him in the leg. I think we can all assume I would probably be held more responsible for not securing my tiger than not securing my goldfish. How much of a difference we're going to get into. But the difference between something that is tam and something that is mu'ad, the something that has been either from the beginning or has earned a warning that this is a danger, that there's a difference between how we handle those two types of agents of damage. Agents of damage, that'd be like a really cool secret agent. Agents of damage, sorry. So we've got 5 that are considered tam, and we've got 5 that are considered mu'ad, 5 that are considered innocentish, and 5 that are considered dangerous from the beginning or dangerous in their current state. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we're talking about.
Instead of the word attested, I'm going to put either presumed or likely. As for example, cattle are not a likely danger to butt, push, bite, lie down, or kick.
Right. The reason why they use attested is because the word mu'ad is like coming from the word ed for testimony, meaning that there has been enough evidence that we can reasonably presume that it will behave in a certain way. So that's why they use the term attested.
Which doesn't make as much sense in English as it does in Hebrew.
Exactly. But it's tested, right? We have tested these animals,
Okay.
and for a cow, butting, pushing, biting, lying down, or kicking. Cows don't do that stuff a lot in a way that causes damage. So if your cow is walking down the road with you and you're just, taking it to the market and he goes kick, how are you supposed to know the cow would do that? Right? Cows don't do that as a general rule, right? When it comes to that, cows are tam. They are considered to be not causing that sort of damage. They're innocent. That doesn't mean you're not responsible, but you're not as responsible as you would be if the cow did something that was in its natural behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically saying it's not its natural behavior, so you should not have been expected to take exceptional precautions.
Now, my question is, why is the horse not mentioned?
Well, because we're not talking about horses yet.
Yeah.
We're setting up general categories,
Okay.
right? So we're not going to go through every single animal. We're talking about these animals are sort of the archetypes, the paradigm.
Because the horses are like the most responsible, like, is the huge thing back then.
But I don't think they had that many horses back then in the desert.
Well, this is also within the land of Israel, but horses were not
I'm
as.
sorry, no, you're right. I'm thinking in general,
General
like,
modern terms.
Yeah.
yeah.
A horse became much more common and affordable much later in life. The average peasant didn't have a horse back then.
No.
You might be lucky to have a donkey or a mule, but ox and cows were more likely.
Oh, because during Christ, the Romans used to ride the horses.
Yeah, the Romans were the army,
Yeah.
not the average farmer.
Right.
That's my point, right? So, and Romans didn't follow Jewish law.
No.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have done a whole lot of stuff that they did.
Oh, that's obvious.
Okay. B.
The tooth of an animal is a tested danger to eat that which is for it.
Right? So if it's normal for cows to eat grain or grass or hay and straw and that sort of thing, if you are walking it through the market and it's right next to the hay seller and it goes, you should have known that the cow would do that sort of thing. On the other hand, if you're walking it past the glazier and he bites into some glass, what's he doing? Right? For things that are out of its nature, it is considered tam. For things that are in its nature, it is muad. So some animals only eat some things. Those you should already know you have to be careful with that animal around. And other animals, they'll eat anything. And those you have to be careful with them in many different situations. So it's the nature of the beast makes a difference.
So tam is the natural order, and muad is the exception, the opposite.
Tam is you don't expect it to do it.
Okay.
And muad means you should expect it to behave this way, and that means you should be more careful.
So if damage is caused by something that's innocent, you go away and say, oh, it's lightning struck and I have to eat the damage?
We'll get there. But damage caused by a tam, by something that is basically innocent, is handled differently than damage caused by something that is muad. That's what this is trying to lay out.
So every animal is muad and tam at the same time.
For different things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's not like you have a category of animal that tam and different one is muad. Like any animal could be one of the other category different.
Exactly. I mean, again, I can't go through the whole encyclopedia, but yes, exactly. You think like a rabbit. You don't expect rabbits to eat people. You don't expect rabbits to stampede and cause trouble.
Depends if you are watching a Japanese movie, maybe yes.
or if you're watching Holy Grail, Monty Python, right?
Yeah.
But an animal that you put loose in somebody's house that has lots of computer wires, they will absolutely eat right through those wires. And that's known. Everybody who has rabbits knows that rabbits eat everything, that those teeth just are always going, right? They are a grazer. And therefore, even though it's not their normal food, they are known to eat those things, and they would be considered mu'ad when it came to cables. Right? And that's why we don't have a rabbit in my house. Far too many cables. All right, C.
The leg of an animal is an attested danger to break things as it walks along.
Right, so the leg, right, the foot, the hoof, they break things, right? as the phrase, clumsy as an ox, right? A bull in a china shop, although they're not actually that damaging in a china shop. Mythbusters, great episode. They actually made a china shop and put a bull into it, and it didn't break very much. It was really very, if you can find the clip, it's really a great scene. It's just walking through the shelves, no problem. Very, very, like almost like a ballerina. It was really amazing. But
it was a trained ox.
no, it was a wild bull, not a wild. It was like a bull from like a rodeo kind of bull. Yeah. But cows do, and other animals do break things in the way they walk, right? Horses have these legs, and they walk and they break things, and cows have them. So if you're, again, bringing your cow right through the marketplace, and there's some guy who has his little stall and blanket set up with all his special pots that he's selling, and you walk your cow through the pots, guess what's going to happen?
Can you use the same categories for babies or small kids?
We're getting to human beings in just a minute. But the basic principle is one that I hope you already are beginning to get a feel for, which is stuff in its natural behavior you are expected to be more careful about. And stuff with exceptional behavior you are less responsible for. Which means you should know what your stuff does. You are responsible for knowing that, though. And it's not just, oh, I never knew cows could step on things and break them. That, if you want a cow, you should know. And you are presumed to know it by virtue of having a cow.
So you're responsible for stuff that are not in the common behavior. No, in the common behavior.
You are more responsible for stuff in the common behavior.
Yes.
You usually have less, usually still some, responsibility for unusual, but we're going to get to the unusual. Well, I think we can get there today. Yeah.
Item D, also a danger is a warned ox. That is, an ox that has gored before.
Right. So this is the classic example, in fact, from the Torah, but they're spelling it out even more clearly here, which is an ox doesn't normally gore. Right. That's not the normal behavior. You see an ox, you don't immediately think, ah, it's going to kill me with its horns. But if that ox has attacked people or other animals in the past, then absolutely the next time it attacks, you are in more trouble. You are more responsible, right? Now it is muad, right? It used to be tam, but this ox, not all oxes, this ox is now muad for goring because it has shown this behavior, right? Just like my goldfish attacking people. Once I know that fish attacks people, now I have a special responsibility. And if I don't put a screen over the top of the aquarium or something and it attacks again, I can't say, who knew a goldfish would do that? You don't remember the last 2 times it did it? Okay. And?
Another danger is an ox that damages in the domain of the damaged party.
Right. So this is saying even if it's behaving in ways that are not natural, if it's on the property of someone else, then you are responsible for it to a higher degree, right? Even if it's generally tam, once it goes out into someone else's property, you're more liable for its behavior because it's on someone else's property. How did it get there? Right? You should have kept it at home, right? Or at least away from other people's property.
Another danger are human beings.
Right? No, we are muad, right? Guess what? You are more dangerous than an ox. You are presumed to have already been warned. You can't go to the court and say, I didn't know that stabbing someone would hurt them. I never knew that. No, you are warned. You will receive the full responsibility for the damages you cause. You can't say, really, biting causes trouble? Fire does that? You are a human being.
That's why the Torah has more rules for us than the animals.
Well, it's got 0 rules for the animals. Right? We don't expect the animals to obey the covenant or commandments, but we are already instructed on how to live our life. And therefore, if we cause damages, we're on the hook 100%. Right? It's a lovely phrase, in my opinion, right? That human beings are muad, that we are by nature already assumed to know what is right and wrong, and therefore we cannot weasel out of it by saying, I didn't know that's how things worked. Be a human. Take responsibility. All right, and then we have some things.
The wolf, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the panther, and the snake all rank as attested danger.
All the way through. It doesn't matter what they've done before. It doesn't matter if it's the cutest little panther. It wouldn't hurt a fly. No, it is already a danger. And therefore, if it gets out and causes damage, you can't say, oh, but it never hurt anything before. It's a panther, right? That's what they do. And no matter how much you think you've taken care of it, it's not. Now, Rabbi Eliezer is going to disagree with that.
Yes, since he has a different opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says, when they are tame, they are not attested danger. But the snake is always an attested danger.
The nachash, the serpent, always gets a bad rap. It's always considered to be unpredictable. I should point out Rabbi Eliezer loses this argument, and the general rule is these types of wild animals that are known to be predatory and violent, even if they are tame, you still have the high level of responsibility. You can't treat the animal like you would treat your house cat and say, but it's a tame panther. No, that doesn't cut. Doesn't cut it. All right. Okay, so what is the difference? So what's the point of saying whether it's tam or muad for all these damages?
Yeah, what's the difference between that which is harmless and that which is an attested danger? The harmless pays half damages from its own body, and the attested danger pays full damages from the best property of its owner and guardian.
All right, so there's two parts here that we need to get clear. One is how much are you paying for the damage that's been done? And if it is tam, if it is, a cow kicks, no one expected the cow to kick, you are responsible for paying half the damages the cow caused by kicking. Right, so if you remember
From its own body.
Okay, so we're going to get back to that in a second. I said there are two parts. The second part is the body part, the body or best property part. But I want to make sure we got the half damage thing, right? So you have your cow, you're walking through the marketplace, the cow kicks out, it breaks somebody's pot. You are paying half the value of that pot. Okay, everyone got that clear?
So
Right. On the other hand, you are
half damage from the own body means half damage of the property.
We'll get to
No.
that in a minute.
just read half damage.
Damage.
Yeah, I know. So read the word half damage and full damage as two separate ideas, and the from the body and from the best of the property as two separate ideas.
Did you just say the cow kicked over a pot?
Yes.
Well, then that's full.
No.
No.
And from the leg. The leg.
Well, kicking as opposed to walking. Right, and we are going to, and that's a big issue. That's a big issue, right? If it kicks over the pot while walking, then absolutely you're full on the hook.
Okay.
If, on the other hand, it's standing there and just goes like that, that is considered to be a kick, and that is something for which it is tam.
Okay, that's it.
But what if it kicks a human's leg and ends up breaking the guy's knee?
Half damage.
Half damage.
Half damage. Well, how were you supposed to know the cow would behave in such a weird way?
That's true. That's true.
Right? Why would you be responsible, right? The responsibility, to go back to Mishnah 2, the responsibility is contingent on the fact that you should know how to behave responsibly with this creature or this source of damage. And if you can't predict its behavior, then you can't be held as responsible for it when it causes damage. And animals, they always say never work with kids or animals. Animals are unpredictable. They have certain things we can count on. Animals will eat what they eat. Animals will walk as they walk. But there are other things that we can't predict. Well, the cow is going to be in a bad mood and suddenly it's going to flop down. And when it flops down, it just flopped down on someone's pot. It's annoying, but it happens. But you couldn't have predicted it, therefore you couldn't have prevented it. So the half damage is the rule. Let's get to now the body versus best of your property. How much do you have to pay for that pot when the cow breaks it? And let's say, let's do the flopping down so we don't have to worry about kicking versus walking. Let's say the cow flops down and it crushes the pot. And the cow itself is worth $500. And the pot is a priceless antique. Last estimated insurance for $10,000. Guess how much you're paying for the pot?
5,000.
Both.
500. The maximum you can pay is the value of the thing that caused the damage. In the half damage case, there's a cap. So if your $500 cow is on the hook for $5,000 worth of damages, you will pay the value of the animal, which is 500.
Half of the value.
No,
And the whole.
your damages is 5,000, right? So that's how much you should pay, right? That's the half. 10,000 becomes half 5,000, but you can only get up to 500 because that's all the animal's worth. Right? You're not more responsible for the damages caused by the animal than the animal itself is worth. Right? It's what you call a write-off. It's that's all it's worth. And again, this is only though for the case of Tom, right? Where the animal behaves or the other source of damage behaves in a way that is unexpected, and therefore you're not as responsible. But if the animal is muad, if the animal is warned, if it's eating, right? The cows always eat straw, and it comes across in the marketplace the art dealer, and he's made beautiful straw artistry, and the straw is worth $10,000. The cow is still worth $500, and you sit there and you're talking to the guy, and the cow is going and eating this beautiful straw tapestry. You are responsible for $10,000 worth of damage, the whole price, because eating what it normally eats, it is absolutely something, it is attested as being a risk, and therefore you are 100% responsible for it. And even though the cow is only worth $500, you should have been more careful. You are on for the entire price of the damages. Make sense? Okay. You might try to begin. We're going to go into more detail, but you might try to begin to think of some parallels in the modern world of things that are exacerbated. If someone is in an accident because their brakes stop working, you would, I'm assuming, normally think they are less responsible for the damages they cause, right? The car behaves in a way that is totally unpredictable, and what happened here? On the other hand, if they cause damage because they were texting and not watching where they were going, they never even pushed the brakes, wouldn't we consider that to be, muad? You were warned how to drive right, and you chose not to, and therefore you are more responsible for the damages you cause. Make sense? Right? That basic form of logic is what's at work here.
It depends, of course, if you put me in the position of the person whose brakes didn't work, or the person whose car was that got hit that's now out. I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm out half the value of my car because you hit it. It depends which side I'm on as to what I'm going to think is more correct.
And that's why we have a court.
Right.
Right? Because if it were left entirely to the person who caused the damage and the person who received the damage, do you think they would ever come to an agreement? Or do you think that they would really push for as much as they possibly thought they could get away with? And that's what's trying to be avoided here, is the Torah has given certain guidelines, and the rabbis are trying to use those mitzvot, those commandments, to tease out all the implications so that we can get the proper distinctions between different types of damages and therefore different payments and responsibilities. Foremost, so that people won't let their property cause damage to someone else's property, but also so that when it does happen, there can be a resolution that is agreed upon by all the parties involved. And the people will say, it's fair because that's what the Torah said. Right? It's fair, that's because what the halacha is. And therefore, here's your money. Thank you very much. I really wish that it hadn't happened, but I can't blame you. It was your brakes. But I do appreciate that you recognize that as the instrument of the damage, you are still somewhat responsible. And the guy would say, yes, and I'm very sorry for what happened. I hope this does help at least a little bit to, get things back where they should be. That's the ideal. And without a system, there's no way to even get close to that, without just people going for the throat each and every time. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking at the next Mishnah.
It's also kind of good for the judges, because no one is going to say the judge was prejudiced, he didn't see all the facts. We've got the rules as to how the judges should. They get the facts in,
Right.
And then it's clear if your brakes failed without you having done something. So it also lets the judges off the hook in terms of being blamed for having made prejudiced decisions.
Yes, and that's part of the idea of why we have Torah, right? Is that it's not just, Mr. Frank's decision about what's right or wrong.
Right.
It is a chain of tradition, debate, and learning that comes from a mutually accepted binding covenant, the Torah, to then be applied fairly and consistently throughout the community. And therefore, I don't have to feel that the outcome was deliberately vindictive or unfair or exploitative or any of these other worries that sometimes people have. And so it gives us a much better starting point for our society.
Yeah.
And that's why God bothered.
Oh,
Right?
that's the reason.
Well, I mean, you think, and we'll use the last couple minutes on this rather than going to chapter 2. You think and compare, how did legal systems work in other communities? Right? They worked because the king or the nobles told you this is what is law. Right? The king's word was law, and your local lord, he had your hand. In his hand was your life and death. And if he liked you, he would give you this decision. If he didn't like you, he'd give you that decision. And that was simply the right of the king and the nobility. And nobody had any input. That was one of the great things about democracy when we finally got around to inventing it, was, okay, well, if we're going to live together, how about if we agree on the rules together, the whole social contract theory, and we agree on the methodology that we'll use for changing the rules when necessary, majority, election, court oversight, all that good stuff. That was attempting to recreate what God had given us as a family through the gift of Torah, trying to find something. And you can see that people still struggle, even with that social contract thing we've all agreed to be in the same part, the same boat together. People still disagree if they think the law isn't the way they would have personally done it if they'd been king. And that is part of the trouble of living with other human beings. And that's one of the things that Torah tries to avoid for us by saying these laws weren't made by human beings. They were understood, interpreted, and applied by human beings. And yes, there is still room for error, but not for deliberate malfeasance. And if there are rules for fixing that. Because again, the people who are doing the rules or adjudicating the rules are under the rule, unlike the kings and the nobles that were above the rule. Good? Good. We'll leave it there, and we'll pick up with chapter 2 next time.